Hello and welcome to Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. For everyone watching on replay, you're hearing these very first moments. Thank you for watching. I know it's early for folks on the West Coast, but we have a great show planned today. Our guest is Suzanne McCormick, U.S. President of United Way Worldwide. She's the former CEO of United Ways in both Tampa and Portland, Maine. That's United Way Suncoast and United Way of Greater Portland. She's also the former CEO of the American Red Cross of Southern Maine, and as a Peace Corps alum, she taught English in Thailand. And we'll definitely ask her about that as well, especially when we have people watching from across the world. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and guest host of Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. I'm the vice president of events and communications at Digimentors. And I used to work with Suzanne at United Way. I was the director of network communications for 5 years. And before that, I worked at United Way of Snohomish County in Everett, Washington. We'll be talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg legacy, of course, United Way's fight for women's equality, and United Way's response to COVID-19, natural disasters, and more. So please join us. Please share and comment and tag your friends. And we'll go ahead and get this show started. Of course, there's no New York Times cam today. No Upper West Side cam today, since Shree is not with us. He's taking the day off, and we are going to be hosting it from Springfield, Virginia. I'm thrilled to have a great team that helps put this show together. We wouldn't really be able to do this without people watching on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and also we're on YouTube. We have our production staff is, in addition to myself, Shree Srinivasan, of course, is the host, and I am the guest host. But we have Paula Kiger. You can follow her at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor is at Steve DeReeve. Julia Weeks is at Julia L. Weeks. And Carla Baranakis is at Kabara. One of the things that we do is we have people watch on Facebook so that we can share links to stories, share links to some of the content that we're sharing. It makes for a much more engaged and richer experience for people. And of course, Carla helps with securing guests. Julia has been helping with a lot of analytics as well. We're live on both my Facebook page and on Suzanne's Facebook page as well. So if you're watching, please let us know where you're watching from, and please tag guests. We definitely want to hear from you. So with that, what we're going to do is go back, and I think that what we'd like to jump right in and have our guest, Suzanne McCormick, join us. So we'll bring Suzanne on real quick. Again, as we mentioned, Suzanne is the U.S. President of United Way Worldwide, and it's my pleasure to have her join the show. Suzanne?
Hey, Neil. Good morning.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Having me.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Really appreciate it. So you're in Tampa, right?
Well, Tampa's home for me. I'm actually joining you from Orlando, Florida. This is one of the first trips my husband and I ventured out. Came over to Orlando just the afternoon, and you can rent cheap condos in Orlando right now. So just came over and had a little change of pace. So I'm in Orlando.
Great. So one of the things that we ask all of our guests when we start the show is, how have you been doing over the last several months? COVID-19, how has that impacted you and your family, just personally, outside of work?
Whenever anybody asks me that, Neil, I always say I feel incredibly fortunate and lucky in relative terms. Our family has been safe and sound throughout, including extended family. Had the opportunity this summer, after quarantining for a couple weeks, to go up to Maine and see my mother and father-in-law, and then also, after quarantining, got to actually see my mother in North Carolina. So that was really good, and that's after 6 or 7 months of being away. And then I have my youngest is started her senior year in high school. So that's been interesting and, of course, challenging, as all families know and are facing. She went back to school for she got about 9 days of school, and then one of her classmates tested positive. So she's now back in a 14-day quarantine, although we're lucky she tested positive. And then my eldest son he serves in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and he is in Fort Benning, Georgia. And it's been interesting to see how he's a young private first class. It's been interesting to hear, how COVID has impacted his training, much more limited, and yet they still keep at it. So, we're really fortunate. I have friends who lost parents and spouses, and so when you look at other families and what they've suffered through, I have to say that we've been really lucky.
It's hard for a lot of people, and I think that's important to note how lucky people are, right? I mean, I know people who've passed away, several people who've been sick, and it's impacted our lives in so many ways. It's been so profound, whether it's school, whether it's work. It's changed everything that we've done. We'll talk about United Way's response to COVID-19 and some of the work that you're doing. Up till recently, the work that we were doing together. Yeah. So it's always that switch is always hard, right? But I want to start with what I think is top of mind for a lot of people right now, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her passing on Friday evening, on the eve of on the start of Rosh Hashanah, was just devastating for a lot of people. The New York Times obit is in today's paper. We'll take a look at that. As we bring that up, I wanted you to take a moment. What were your thoughts when you heard about her passing? And we'll talk about United Way's work around women's equality and Women United in a moment. But what was your initial reaction?
I think, the universe, it feels like it was just sadness. I immediately, my social media with my close women friends, started to blow up with everyone just expressing grief and sadness and disappointment, not only because of how she led personally and all that she did, but I think her passing at this point in time, 2 months out from our next election, feels like has added another degree of instability and concern. And so it's just, I think the feelings are so multidimensional. Just sad for just an incredible human being's passing, and also I think there's an opportunity to celebrate everything that she contributed. But I think the bigger concern is, what does that mean now? I'm sure we'll get to talk about this. The potential increased political divide that's going to come from determining whether or not her replacement is seated before the election or not. But she was, amazing woman on so many fronts, and I think for any woman, it's hard not to have admired her. And it's we have to be grateful for all that she did for us.
I completely agree. I want to show folks a little bit of the paper today. So let me bring that in, and we'll go to the New York Times cam. In the paper today, in addition to the obit, but even before you get to the obit, you see the this statue. It's a fearless girl that's on Wall Street, and I think it's really incredible that they were able to get the ad in there with Justice Ginsburg's the thing that she wore on her robe rather, which is really interesting. And when you look at the rest of the paper and the way they laid it out, of course the news broke on Friday. I wasn't able to pick up the paper yesterday. Saw it online. The front page was very impressive. But as we get to the obit, and it's actually a little further down, back here, you see here, this is the obituary by Linda Greenhouse. 2 full pages. This great picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg from 1972, walking down the steps with other justices when Chief Justice William Rehnquist had passed away. Many more pictures online as well, but 2 full pages, and the coverage is pretty. It starts with the obit. You have another 3rd page over here. You obviously get into the politics as well in terms of the nomination, Trump's plans to nominate someone, the Merrick Garland rule. For folks who aren't familiar with that, this was the Republicans blocked a nomination in the last year of President Obama's term. So that was a little, that's been causing a major issue in terms of politics. But a lot of the focus right now is on that I want to focus on was Justice Ginsburg's legacy. We had the chance to interview the producers of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary almost 2 years ago, which was incredible. We went out and saw it. I saw the other movie recently. Did you happen to see any of those documentaries, Suzanne?
I didn't see the documentaries. I just was jotting down. I have to put that on my list. I did see the couple years ago the movie On the Basis of Sex.
Yes.
Yeah, that I was invited actually to like a pre-release for a group of women, and it was incredible. I mean, it was really. I thought it was, and it was very. To me, I hope it seemed accurate. I hope it was accurate. But that was really impactful.
It was. I want to take a moment, and this is going to be we're working on some technical issues here in terms of the show. So the show is live on all these channels, but we're not getting the comments directly. So I'm going to try and share my screen and see whether I can bring in the comments, just to be able to show everyone who is watching and saying hi. So I'm going to see what I can pull up, and there we go. And give me one moment to do that. So whoopsie, let's try that again. So when you do a live broadcast, sometimes you have to improvise. So on your page, Suzanne, I saw Amy D'Onofrio was watching. She noticed that we were both sporting Live United shirts, and I'm sorry about the blinking, so I won't be able to do that as well as I would have liked. So I'm going to just read the comments and just at least acknowledge people that are there. Amy D'Onofrio, I mentioned that we were both sporting our Live United shirts. Ashley Wickham is watching on YouTube, and that's on your page, and then also on my page. Let's see who is watching. Let's see here. We have my mom watching from Hastings on Hudson, New York. Hi, Mom. My mom's always watching, which is great.
Oh, that's great.
Carol Peters from United Way of McHenry County is excited to listen and watch McHenry County, Illinois. Pamela Beckford as well, watching from Northeast Indiana. Brooke Smith is watching from United Way of Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. Our friend Sojana Chandrasekhar is saying good morning to all of us. And Jessica Schatt from Racine. Thank you, Jessica, for watching. Really appreciate it. She tagged a number of colleagues in the post. She said that your Live United shirt is her favorite. Tell us a little bit about that shirt, Suzanne.
Well, it's you've got just the black and white. I've got the black and the rainbow, which was sort of an evolution of the T-shirt, just to recognize our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion for all, which is a priority. So it's our Pride Live United shirt, but in my mind, it goes way beyond pride. It's a favorite of all. Every time I wear it, especially like when my kids' friends see it, they all want one. Yeah, it's a great shirt. And Neil, more of your friends are up this morning than mine. I'll be curious to see which of my friends are up on a Sunday morning looking at Facebook.
They will. And one of the great things is that people can watch it on replay. The video is there afterward, and we can certainly share it and encourage people to watch. I think that these are actually, Suzanne, we should understand these are our mutual friends, right? The folks watching from United Way. I mean, this is for me an incredible honor and a privilege. So I really just want to acknowledge that and thank you for joining us on the show. We were talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy, and you mentioned the shirt and the nod to inclusivity around pride, etc. One of the things in terms of talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy, you recently participated in a discussion about women's suffrage and how the fight for equity continues. It was moderated by Michelle Branch, who's the chair of Women United, the Global Leadership Council. Morgan Johnson and Dr. Brenda Stevenson was on the show as well. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? Our fight for equity continues.
Well, I mean, we like many celebrated the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, and it could be easy to be angry about that, but we wanted to celebrate that as part of this event. But we also wanted to. It gave us really a reflection point to look at what did that really mean for women, and it didn't mean the right to vote for all women. There were so many women who were Black Americans, Asian Americans, who also joined the fight for suffrage. But when the vote passed, many of them did not actually get the right to vote for many years later. There were states who made it incredibly hard for Black women to vote, especially. And so we wanted to recognize their contributions. We tend, like the majority of American history is, as we've seen, elevates the contribution of white Americans and often does not pay tribute to Black Americans. And there were so many incredible Black women who were leaders and were also discriminated during their efforts. And so Dr. Stevens, she's a historian, and she provided some examples of that. And that was really the purpose of the event. I actually, the weekend before, last weekend, I participated in an online workshop with Robin DiAngelo, who is the author of White Fragility. And she was, the workshop was on really geared towards race equity, but she spent a good part of the opening of the workshop looking at that example of women's right to vote, which was not inclusive, as sort of setting the stage, and also really showing how the power structures in our country still reside absolutely predominantly with men. And then she went in to show the same in regards to race. But one of the images that she showed us, and it's related to this, was it was either a Facebook or a Google image, like on the anniversary, like the pop-up on Google the morning of something, celebrates, and they had this picture of like 9 women. And if you really picture, only 2 of the women got the right to vote in that picture, because there were only 2 white women, and the rest were Black or women of color. And it was a really profound image in conversation. So that's what we were trying to highlight with our event last week.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we want to note is that last month, August 16th, rather, we had Veronica Chambers as a guest on the New York Times Read Along. She curated a special section for the New York Times, Suffrage at 100, an incredible piece. And the New York Times actually asked us to have her on the show, which was great. One of the pieces they had was the focus on women of color and how they've been excluded from the story of suffrage and the suffrage movement in general. So it's definitely great to see, United Way recognizing that, and really there's been a huge focus on equity and inclusion over the last few months, particularly in the last, since June, after the murder of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd up in Minneapolis, several other. I mean, the list is long. Can you talk a little bit about United Way's work around equity more broadly?
Sure. I'd love to, because I'm very proud of the work that United Way has put forward in regards to equity. When I joined the organization, there was already a really strong body of work that had been achieved, led by our Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and our Chief Diversity Officer, Marvine Hart, who has been a champion of this work for her whole life. And she, in partnership with the Annie E. Casey Foundation and many other organizations and leaders in our network and other foundations, developed a really strong toolkit. We call it the Equity Toolkit, that we've been able to provide to our network of over 1,000 United Ways around the country. And the toolkit is just jam-packed with teachings and resources to help not just local United Ways, but it's applicable to any organization, I think, and especially any nonprofit, to help them, assess where are they as an organization in regards to diversity and inclusion, but also, most importantly, equity. So it has tools to help organizations look at their hiring practices, their vendor selection, how they support staff, how they train staff. So that's a toolkit that we've been able to get out into the network. And then also released fairly recently was a second body of work. Again, another just robust resource, not just for our network, but for any organization. We call that the Equity Framework. And that's really focused on how to help our local United Ways and other nonprofits promote equity externally, outside of their organizations and in their communities. How do they involve people with lived experience around racism into their decision-making processes? So we have a really great foundation. And then at the end of July, our membership took a really strong step and voted to change our bylaws to mandate now that any United Way, to be a United Way, that you have to make a really intentional commitment to ending racial equity. You have to have a publicly posted statement against racism. Annually now, all of our local United Way affiliates will be required, their staff and their board members will be required to go through annual equity training. And then finally, our local United Ways will have to include a criteria that looks at equity in their investment strategy. And so we're hoping that will incent and influence other nonprofits to take a stronger role. So there's a lot to be proud of. And I would say, as we all know, the work will never be over, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
We do, and we've made some progress, which is great. And there I go again, slipping back into the we. As folks might know, on both sides, for the New York Times Read Along family, they know I've talked about United Way for the last several years. I worked there for 5 years, and early August it was my last day before joining Digimentors full time. But I was there when we had the vote, when we had the big push on equity, and it was definitely a proud moment for many of us. I want to take a moment to recognize some of the comments coming in. Please, I want to encourage people to keep sharing, keep adding your comments to whether you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube. We're live on my Facebook page, Shree's Facebook page, Suzanne's Facebook page. and all of our Twitter accounts as well. We are experiencing a minor glitch with the system that we usually use. So usually, Suzanne, we're able to show comments on the screen directly and show people's name and face. And unfortunately, we can't do that today. But our great production team, and this is why you have a full production team behind you, is conscientiously, diligently sharing the comments with me so I can read them aloud. So with your permission, I'd like to at least acknowledge some of the people that have been watching that I haven't been able to acknowledge earlier. Laura Silverman said good morning from Philadelphia. Diane Stefani is dialing in from Margate, New Jersey. Claudia Dreyfus is watching as well as Joe Appio, Pradnya Haldapur, and Jonathan Borstein. These are regulars from our New York Times family. We mentioned Carol Peters earlier. Sarman Nagela is working, our friend Stephen Kaplan. And Jessica Schatt mentioned that this is a milestone in the marathon, not the end of the race. She could have been referring to the equity vote. She could have been referring to any of the work that we're doing. We really do need to think of it as a marathon and not as a sprint. Therese Steiner is watching as well. Brian Tierney, as you know, works on our communications team, worked on the communications team I used to work on until August. It's a little bit of whiplash seeing me and seeing you in a Live United shirt, Neil. Really excited to hear the conversation this morning. So thank you, Brian, for watching. Maureen No from Indiana United Ways. Suzanne and Neil, thank you for showcasing the heart of what United Ways fight for every day. And of course, as we all know, United Way fights for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in every community. I'd like to take a moment, Suzanne, and share a video that United Way released recently that tells a little bit more about, gives a little bit just a perspective on the work we do. So I'm just going to bring that up real quick. Give me one moment. These are, of course, the adventures of live TV. So let's just hit play on that real quick.
It's hard to hope, hard to cope with crisis.
But while we might be all alone, we've never been more tightly tethered, because we'll only weather this unknown
together. So we get to work. We mend, we don't break even when we bend.
Somewhere, another mom pays her bills. Somewhere, another child eats his fill. We are the world's neighbors, making our communities brighter, greater,
fighting for every person in the neighborhood. We, the coming of the common good, so dare to care, to be hope-sighted. We're never divided, for when we live to give, we always live united.
Powerful video. And that of course was a partnership with Truist for us. Suzanne, for people who are watching who are not from United Way, can you offer just a little bit of background? Talk about what is United Way? How do you describe it to people in a minute or less?
United Way to me is well, I think it is to communities. It's a focal point for community to come together to solve the most complex problems a community faces. I think our superpower is that we understand the complexity of challenges in a community, and then because we have so many different relationships, we're able to bring those relationships from different sectors together, really just visualize a round table, and we bring together the leaders of different sectors to talk about how we work together to solve those problems. And then we work really hard to find the resources to connect to needs. So we're the hub of a wheel in a community, and more than anything, I think what's most of money that we put into community. It's not necessarily the volunteers that we engage in community. It's the leadership that we bring to help communities come together and solve problems. And as we have moved through the last 6 and 7 months of our COVID response, we've never seen the importance of that and the relevance and our relevancy be greater than it is now. Communities need an organization they can rely on, that can be neutral, that can be objective, that can be strategic in looking at solutions to really hard things. So that was more than a minute, but you know, I love United Way, so.
But that's not bad, and that's one of the challenges we've always had in describing our work and trying to explain what we do, and that's, you know, part of the reason when we have the new branding and the new strategy. How do we condense the work that we're doing in easy to share format? I want to remind people to keep sharing your comments. We will read them on the air. We have a number of people watching on LinkedIn as well, including another former colleague of ours. So watching on LinkedIn, if I can find that note, Patricia Freudenberg and Tim Sohn, two friends of the Read Along, Daryl Cicado, but Francesca Burks, and then another colleague you might remember, Jonathan Swan, who also recently left United Way, another former colleague. I was surprised when I saw that. I think it was the beginning of September. So everyone's coming back to watch and to hear what you have to say. You mentioned COVID-19, and there's so much COVID-19 in the news. We'll certainly get to the paper, but can you talk a little bit? There's a new initiative that United Way has around supporting grocery store workers, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, one of the really great, you hate to say something great happened in COVID, but I do. I think there are some like amazing moments and amazing experiences and amazing learnings that have come from COVID, and perhaps we'll have more time to talk about those. But for United Way and for our communities, one of the really important positive outcomes of the response to COVID was that some unusual partners came forward who saw the leadership of United Way, saw United Way as a great partner to be able to impact hundreds of thousands of people across the country, as opposed to just a single organization touching one small group. And we had the opportunity to enter into a conversation with Kendall Jackson Wineries, who wanted to do something. They recognized that that grocery workers are frontline workers. I think we all saw that through the pandemic. I know every day I would go to, not every day, I didn't go to the grocery store every day, but when I would go to the grocery store, I would see like my favorite cashiers and baggers, some of them who are elderly or have families, and they were there every single day exposing themselves so that we all could get what we needed. And I don't think that at first we really recognized them as frontline workers, but they were, and they gave and they sacrificed so much through the pandemic, and they continue to put themselves in harm's way on a daily basis. So Kendall Jackson recognized that and wanted to do something for them. And they looked around to see if there was any national relief fund to support grocery store workers. And they couldn't find a national fund. United Way, and decided to set up that fund. And they are getting contributions from their networks. They're pledging to raise millions of dollars over a 10-year period. So this is not a short-term endeavor. This is a commitment to grocery store workers to help them meet their basic needs. We know many grocery store workers are, they're lower wage workers, and they work on an hourly basis. And so from the fund, they'll be able to access or get $250 gift cards, which they'll be able to use to support their basic needs. But it's a new partnership with Kendall Jackson, sort of an unusual partner for us. But again, I think it's an example of the creativity and the innovation that has been a really strong outcome of the COVID response.
So let's take a look at the paper for a little bit. There's some really important stories in the paper talking about COVID-19. If you look at the review section, and this is, following up the conversation we just had, there's this cover page. You can see the stark image. The headline is "The Second Wave," Janine Interlandi, on how bad the fall and winter of the pandemic might be. David Quammen on the evolutionary success story of the coronavirus. Success for the coronavirus, not for us. And there's another article on the only way to stop the spread. And there's another. In terms of the three kind of competing topics we're talking about today, in terms of competing for space in the paper, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course, this is an opinion piece that was originally run in October 2016. Really great piece by her. Another piece by Gail Collins about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But then if you keep looking inside, this is the piece about the pandemic in fall and winter, in terms of how we're not out of the woods by any means. Looking at the virus and how it has evolved. And then this 2-page spread on how to stop the pandemic, build a fence. This is by Tomas Payo and Nathaniel Lash and Irina Serkez. And looking at the infection rates where fences have been used, quarantines. America's lockdown was not effective. So it's really making that argument that fences alone can't stop the virus, but they are critical to the solution. As we turn the page, again, this focus on the forest fires, and we'll look at the New York Times Magazine in just a moment. One opinion piece just called them climate fires, and this really interesting graph. You can see the color coding showing wildfires, water stress, extreme heat, hurricanes, extreme rainfall, sea level rise. You can see the wildfires in red in the West Coast, extreme rainfall. The green and the blue is mostly hurricanes, extreme heat in the middle part, and then drought, water in the yellow part of the country. Forever trying to tame the forces of nature. And then the editorial as well, Fire, Floods, and Hope, which was very interesting for me, just in terms of watching the paper and understanding kind of what's in the paper and what's not. I was surprised. I thought that the RBG editorial, the one about Ruth Bader Ginsburg legacy, would be in today's edition, and that the obit would be in yesterday's. So it's always challenging in terms of figuring out what's in the print edition and what's online, particularly when things are shared early. But this is the Sunday review section, and certainly a lot to consider. The other piece that I want to make sure that we spend time with, and we'll talk about the magazine and show the video making of the cover of the magazine, and then we'll talk about United Way's role in disaster relief, and then we'll also get back to some viewer comments. But this is the cover, and you can see very stark photography. The text, which you wouldn't be able to read on screen, but it says how climate change will remap where Americans live, by Abram Lustgarten. It's very interesting the way that they laid that out. So let's take a moment and show the making of the video, which is always a great feature, and we're showing it a little earlier than usual, but I want to be able to show the video and then talk about United Way's work around climate change. So give me one moment to set that up. Bring that up here. And one moment.
From the New York Times Magazine, this is Behind the Cover. Our cover story this week by Abram Lustgarten is the second part of our series on climate migration in collaboration with ProPublica and the Pulitzer Center. The story is both data-driven and personal. The fires in California burned just 12 miles from Abram's home.
Over the course of a month, Meredith Kohut traveled around the U.S. documenting the wildfires in California, the record-breaking heat in Arizona, and the aftermath of the hurricanes in Louisiana.
Unfortunately, she was able to document all these various crises within the span of a month because they all were occurring during that time simultaneously.
I mean, that says it all.
I stayed up all night photographing fires, many times working more than 24 hours straight, shooting until 5 or 6 in the morning.
I think we immediately knew that this particular scene was one that we wanted on the cover.
This particular picture is just jaw-dropping. The width of that row of flames cutting across it like a scar is incredibly dramatic. But on the cover, you go in tighter.
Having a more immersive feel to this was important. It's terrifying.
With this picture, Meredith enables us to actually feel the kind of fear and anxiety and worry for the future that the people who live in these homes must feel. As Abram concludes in his piece, nobody wants to migrate away from home. They do it when there's no longer any other choice.
Certainly very, very powerful and striking. Suzanne, United Way has been responding to natural disasters for several years, and this year is no different. There is a series of West Coast wildfire relief funds, and United Ways across the region are responding. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then also, of course, our United Ways in Louisiana had to deal with Hurricane Laura as well.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. Also, I think if I can just to also acknowledge, I think one of the other disasters that I think as the video just showed, disasters are happening so much more frequently and with like more variety than we've ever seen before. And one of the other disasters that doesn't get mentioned very often is the Iowa derecho. I didn't even know what that was, but again, as I understand it, that wiped out almost 50% of Iowa's corn crop. So that's another disaster that's out there. As I said, when you asked me, like, what does United Way do? We provide leadership in community, and we do that during natural and man-made disasters as well. Our local United Ways, in addition to raising funds, often coordinate volunteer relief efforts. But one of the most important things that we do and support during disasters is through our 211 network. 211 is a 3-digit dial, and often there's a text capacity for people to get information about resources and also in many cases to get direct relief. Some of our 211s are able to provide financial assistance to those who are impacted. And so 211 serves a really important role in disasters. It is the go-to place for information and connection, always for those who need help and often for those who want to give help. As an example, during COVID-19, this is back to COVID, but the same thing happens in disasters. The 33, I think it was 33 governors' offices activated or designated 211 as the go-to number in their state for information. That happens in disasters as well. The other really important role that we play in disasters is that we commit to long-term recovery. We don't just focus our efforts on the immediate response, the first 3 months, first 6 months. We will continue to work through the phases of recovery and rebuilding. We have United Ways. Our United Way in Louisiana, in New Orleans, for example, still has focus on the recovery efforts around Katrina and continues to invest in strategies. And that happens in the rebuilding efforts in communities across the country.
You mentioned United Way of Southeast Louisiana. I'm not going to try acrobatics to get my New York Times cam to show the back of my shirt, but this Black United Way Live United shirt is actually from United Way of Southeast Louisiana. From when I went down there, we have some great friends down there. Of course, Michael Williamson and Missy Ramagosa in particular. I want to make sure that we catch some of the comments, Suzanne, because and it's going to go back a little bit in terms of the conversation. But Andy Abrams, a colleague of ours at United Way Worldwide and from Maine, of course, from Portland. Thank you, Suzanne, for your role in moving our diversity work ahead. The depth of your support for this has been a ray of hope this year. And Jessica was saying that Jessica Schatt was saying she agrees there's been much loss and struggle. There's also been so much innovation, collaboration, and hope that's come from the pandemic. There was an interesting question that came from a colleague, Therese Steiner, that we work with at Digimentors. She's on the board of several nonprofits who are working on equity and inclusion initiatives. And she wants to know, is the toolkit available for others? I believe it is on our public website, correct?
Yes, it is. And we want, and if she has any trouble, we'll have to figure out how to connect her. But yes, it should be. And again, as I said, we want it to be used by more than United Ways because it's a really powerful set of resources.
We'll find the link and I think that Paula, if you search for Equity Toolkit United Way, you might be able to find the link and share that with Therese, and we can always follow up later as well. Jessica is saying that
we'll get it up.
Yeah, no, I'm fairly certain it was on our public website. Jessica was saying that they're embedding monthly equity training into their staff training, and so that people are learning together. Carol Peters is proud of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Steve Campbell on your Facebook page, Suzanne. We often learn from our kids during times like these. Are there things you've learned from your high school age daughter over the past few months?
I learned something from my high school age daughter every day. She's
and
actually
not just about TikTok, I assume.
Yeah, she's a pretty incredible human being. I think one of the things that I'm learning, maybe it's more learning about her, is she really does have an appreciation. COVID has forced her to slow down in her life, and excuse me. And I've seen her appreciation for that. I think at first she was annoyed, but I think she's really come to appreciate the slow pace. And then when I say I learn every day is my daughter has a really great sense of humor, and so for me, she continues to remind me never to take things too seriously, just because humor helps you get through the day.
It definitely does. Reading through Pradnya Haldapur, a friend of ours in Silver Spring, reminds me that it's always going to be we when I talk about United Way. It's not one of those things that you lose easily. And as I've been saying, I'll always live united. That's the phrase that obviously we use. Our friend Ron Thomas is checking in from Dubai. David Ross is saying good morning. David, good to see you. Angie Price Finney is saying hi from Berks County, and that it's good to see us both. So another local United Way colleague. Want to see other comments. Jessica, we're the hand raisers and game changers. That's from our brand credo. And then we have a Josh Peterson shared the link to 211 on I believe it was either my page. I think he's watching on. So thank you, Josh, and the rest of the team can find that in our chat, so you can share that across our platforms. That's 211.org is the easy way to share it. Carol said that video that we saw earlier was powerful. She loves how they use the word immerse. United Way is leaning in, especially during natural disasters, and we do lead in a big way. And she appreciated you mentioning Iowa. I think that you're right. Not a lot of people understand the impact of the winds out there. Let's see what else. And Teresa says, thank you. We'll definitely make sure to work with her to share that information with her colleagues. So we've talked about United's work with natural disasters. We've talked about our equity work. I think that one of the other things that we really wanted to talk about And as we focus on this election year and the importance of elections, not just in terms of not a question just of party, but also the importance of voting and the census. That's something that United Way has been very active on as well. And we did a kickoff back in the spring, a United We Count, United We Vote event with our policy team and folks from the Census Bureau. Someone who plays soccer, I'm not sure if people recognize Megan Rapinoe in the middle, but also from MTV, DJ William Lifestyle. How important is the census, Suzanne? Why are we focusing on that so much?
Well, hopefully people have heard, the census doesn't happen very often, and yet the impact it has on how we organize support and investments in communities across our countries is based on the census. And that's why it's so important for us to know who is living and working where. Decisions about education funding for federal assistance through federal assistance programs or benefits programs like SNAP or women, infants, and children support, our whole education system. So it's all based on understanding the makeup of our communities, as well as how we organize around voting in the future. So that's why it's so important for people to be counted, so that we know you are there. And that was really the basis of the United We Count. And that led us to also, coupling that with United We Vote, because not only is it important for us to be known, it's also important for us to use our voices. We at United Way, we promote three things, and most people know us for giving. So, we always say give, we say volunteer, but we also say advocate. And so give, advocate, volunteer, and voting is one of the most precious rights that we have in our country. And it's also one of the most basic ways that we can advocate. It's showing up, and it's not only showing up, I think more than ever, part of voting is educating yourself, not with fake news, but with real information about the character and the philosophy and the principles of our potential leaders. And then, voting for who you believe will look out for you and your communities and others. So maybe a long answer, but it's those two things go together. And what we know is that, COVID made it really difficult for us to engage in the census work in the same way that we have in the past. And that's one of the reasons that United Ways across the country have committed to be partners in their communities around not only promoting, but actually supporting, in some cases, census workers to get out and actually do the count.
Sure. So before we move on, I want to make sure that we acknowledge our sponsors. In addition to our staff, which we acknowledged in the beginning, we always take a moment to thank our sponsors for the New York Times read-along. So we'll just take a quick moment to do that, Suzanne. So the first group that we'd like to recognize is Muckrack, and thank Muckrack for their support of the New York Times read-along. As folks might know, they helped Srinivasan, who's the host of the New York Times read-along. He's been doing this for almost 5 years. We're hitting 5 years in October. Organized a course on social media, fundamentals of social media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone. It's a free on-demand course. You can enroll at mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And some background about Muckrack. Muckrack helps you discover news as it breaks, easily generate reports, and explore the work of journalists, podcasters, bloggers, and more. Muckrack software helps PR teams build stronger relationships with the media. And if you're a journalist, you might also be eligible for their free tools to identify trends and showcase your work. So thank you, Muckrack, for your support. We'd also like to thank, in addition to Muckrack, we'd also like to thank Strategy Focus Group, another one of our sponsors. Muckrack and Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Ron Thomas is watching from Dubai. Thank you, Ron, for your support. And if you want to learn more about our sponsors, please follow these links, readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/strategy focus group. And if you're interested in being a sponsor for the New York Times Read Along, you can contact Shri at Digimentors.group or myself, Neil Parekh, Neil@Digimentors.group. We would be happy to work with you, and we have very reasonable rates. If you have a short-term event that you want to promote or a longer-term engagement, we can work with you and your budget. So thank you to our sponsors for their support. And I know that Suzanne, you can appreciate thanking our sponsors. One of the things that we were always proud of with United Way is the great support we get. There I go again. The great support that United Way gets from our partners, both from corporate partners and also from working families and average individuals who make paycheck deductions every paycheck to support the work of United Way. So, ask, thank, and inform is one of the things that we always talked about in communications, right? And it's a little bit of a different order. You inform, ask, and then thank. But we always want to make sure we acknowledge and thank people for the great support they offer. We wouldn't be able to do this work without them. I want to get back to the paper and also see if you have some thoughts as we go. So I'm going to go back to the New York Times cam. What's always interesting, and we skipped over some of the beginning parts earlier, but it's always interesting to see the ads in the paper. And one of the things that we've learned from our work, Stuart Elliott, a longtime advertising columnist for the New York Times, was our guest. We know that this ad from Tiffany and Company is at the very top of the top right of page 3. They've paid extra to have that placement for the last almost 100 years. So that means something. Print still means something for folks. We're going to take a look at On This Day in History, which is always fun. Simon and Garfunkel reunion jams Central Park, September 20th, 1981. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel joined their voices once again at a free concert that drew a crowd of estimated at 400,000. Suzanne, a Simon and Garfunkel fan?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a huge music person, Neil. And that's one thing my husband and my daughter tease me about. I'm still pretty content with Barry Manilow and John Denver. So actually, Simon and Garfunkel are right up my alley.
John Denver was a favorite of mine as well. I won't argue with you there. And then in terms of looking at the ads, the other thing, we mentioned this ad of the Fearless Girl statue. But what was interesting, there was another ad I wanted to pull in. This one full page ad, Free Nasreen. She's on a hunger strike, jailed in Iran, paid for by the Center for Human Rights in Iran. This ad from Morgan Stanley, and it's a Where Will Green Bonds Go Next? A message from Navindu Katugampala. I'm doing my best on the pronunciation, but just interesting to profile someone. But what I really want to point out, and if you have the hard copy of the paper, you can check this out. This 2-page spread, Surround Yourself with the News. Discover the New York Times AR First Journalism, Augmented Reality. There's a QR code you can scan to launch their latest effect on Instagram. And it's journalism by the New York Times, technology by Facebook. So in addition to covering the paper and the journalism, we're always interested in the layout and the graphic design, what they're doing with advertisements. Then you see a house ad on the left page celebrating groundbreaking visual reporting, Emmy nominations, and you can learn more at NewYorkTimes.com, nytimes.com/Emmy record. which is really interesting. And as we flip through, one of the things to note when you get the paper, and I'm just going to show folks here, what we learned from Tom Jolly, who's the print editor of the New York Times, when he was a guest on the show, is that sometimes the front section is longer than they can deal with on the presses. This goes 28 pages. So the next section, it almost is like another section nestled in. And I always thought that was interesting because when you're looking at the paper, if you open the paper, you're more likely to read this next story. This happens to be about the impact of Justice Ginsburg's passing on the campaign, but then you can pull it out and start flipping just through this section as well. We often look at the obituaries in the New York Times, and I was surprised to see this obit for Stephen Cohen, professor and influential historian of Russia, had passed away. I actually studied Russian history in college and was familiar with several of Stephen Cohen's books. I like reading obits, as does Shri, because a well done obituary is like reading history. It's like reading current events. You'll learn about the arts when you hear about someone's life. So it's always something. Is that do you read obituaries, Suzanne?
Sometimes my mother does, and she always fills me in on what's happening in my local community. What you just said, though, Neil, it really is true. It is true. I actually once was taking a leadership class, and one of the exercises was to write your own obituary, because the intention was to get us focused on what we wanted people to say, like what mark did you want to leave on the world, and what did you want others to learn from you through your life, and so what you just said, that really it rings true with me. It's history, but it's also I find there's a lot of moral lessons in obituaries as well.
There certainly are, and there's a lot we can learn from that. I think that I want to just share Patricia Freudenberg, again, one of our regular viewers on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't think that anyone in our comm shop could have written this any better. United Way represents the fundamentals of humanitarian efforts. Thank you, Suzanne, for your moral service. I think that we'll have to copy and paste that and share that with the team. And some dialogue between Carol and Josh Peterson as well. It really is one of the things that we've done with United Way, with the New York Times Read Along, is bring people together. This is a community of people that watch on a regular basis. So that's one of the things that we've really enjoyed. I've been the executive producer of the show for 3 years, this Sunday morning show, and Shri's been doing this for almost 5 years. So it's great when you have that kind of continuity and long-term commitment. You, before joining United Way Worldwide as U.S. president, you were in Tampa. Shri and I actually got to come down to do a social media workshop with you and the rest of your team. This was, I think, 2 years ago. And then before that, you were in Portland, right?
That's correct.
What would you say about your experience moving from Portland to Tampa and then working with us in Alexandria, at least looking at the national level?
The two communities that I have spent most of my career serving there's a lot of similarities, and there are some differences, and I feel really grateful to have had the opportunity to live and work and experience both of those. Maine is a huge state, but relatively small from a population perspective. Very rural state. Only 1.3 million people are in Maine, and so the largest city is Portland. But for anyone who has visited, Portland's not very large. I mean, it's an amazing city full of really strong creative community. If you're a foodie, foodies love Portland because there's just so many incredible restaurants. It's a very collaborative community. I think part of that is because of the size. We have an incredibly strong United Way there. And it's got huge support from the community. Again, it serves as a central place of pulling people together around, complex problems. What my experience there was, smaller community, very rich culturally, and I had the opportunity to live very rurally. So had this dynamic every day of going into sort of a bustling, small city, but then also living out in the country, which was really important for my husband and for us at the time. We wanted to raise our kids someplace that was sort of more rural, connected to more the environment and nature. The move to Tampa Tampa's very different. And I think the thing that was most important in our decision to move to Tampa was the diversity of the community. While we loved Maine, and there is some diversity, Maine is known as one of the whitest states in the nation. And while there is, really significant socioeconomic diversity, there isn't a lot of other diversity that my kids were experiencing on a daily basis. And that's one of the things that was really important to us, is I wanted my kids to have part of their growing up in a community that really is representative of our country. So that was, and also I think some of the needs, or sort of like, for example, when you just say poverty or communities where the majority of people are living in poverty, that's much more visible in the Tampa area than it was where we were living before. And again, I thought that was important for my family. And that's been, living in Tampa has been a really rich experience in terms of diversity. It really, accelerated my learning around systemic racism. So I think that's, again, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to have been both places. And then now in my new role, I think one of the things I love best or most about it is the opportunity to visit, in the olden days in person and now virtually, communities around the country, and to understand the dynamics and the differences, but also the similarities. From visiting out, I hadn't spent that much time understanding communities out west. Like, that's been a learning for me. Also, even though I was born in the central part of the country, hadn't spent that much time understanding, communities. Most of my experience was on the East Coast. So it's just been really rich to get to meet our leaders and our communities around the country. Feel really lucky.
That was my favorite part of working with United Way as well. The working with local United Way staff, going to regional conferences, state associations, being able to go to Louisiana, Indiana, Michigan, Washington State, Oregon, the Western Regional Conference, the Great Rivers Conference, the Southeast Regional Conference. This is what fueled my work with United Way. For folks that are watching, I think it's also, I want to make sure that they understand, since we have a global audience, that United Way is actually an international organization. It's United Way worldwide, with local United Ways in more than 40 countries and territories, 1,800 communities around the world, very active in Europe, in Ghana, in South Africa, in Latin America as well, and Asia in particular. So there is a richness to that experience. And even from an operational standpoint, right, from when we're talking about internal, it's not just the US, it's not just the East Coast. You always have to keep in mind where colleagues are joining from. What time are you scheduling webinars or meetings? How do remote staff connect? I mean, this was an issue before the pandemic. Certainly almost everyone has been remote in the last several months. But we definitely appreciate that diversity. We do have a question that I want to get to from Carla Baranakis, who is one of our producers. And I'm going to bring it on the screen. This is again a great question for folks to think about. What do you want journalists who work in small local markets to know about United Way? What would you like to see in local coverage of United Way? And before you get to that, Suzanne, Just for context, I want you to know, for everyone else to know, Carla Baranakis is the editor of the Local Connection, which is a newsletter that's put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. Each week it offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists. And best of all, it's free. So this is something you can get by going to bit.ly/local news tips. And she's always looking, she's asking guests to offer their tips for journalists. But in this case, we're trying to identify what should journalists working in local communities in small markets, what should they know about United Way? What would you like them? What would you like to see in local coverage?
I think what I want journalists to see in really all markets, and not necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily distinct to small markets, but I think I'll speak to small markets. Is I want journalists to see United Way as what I might describe as the barometer on the human condition, like the go-to place to find out what is happening from what is happening and what is the condition of the human care system, and what are the problems that a community's most vulnerable citizens are facing. Local United Ways have a really good understanding, not just of a single issue, but of multiple issues that impact their community members. We say, our primary focus is on education, financial stability, and health. Those three things intersect, and we take this holistic view of the condition of our community residents. And so local journalists should see Local United Ways as one of their most important resources to understand what's happening for people and what's not happening for people. I would say that I hope that holds true for big markets as well. I think the other thing is we tend to see sometimes with stories, especially in local communities, stories about individual achievement or individuals overcoming hard circumstances with the support of United Way and partner programs and strategies. I think those are incredibly inspiring and important stories. I'd also like to see more stories about how United Way and their partners are tackling the systems that create hard conditions for people. So how is United Way and its partners, taking it back to equity, focusing on equitable access in regards to education as a system, or health as a system, or workforce development, as a system. So the stories aren't only about individuals, but how we're impacting the systems that either allow or don't allow everyone to find opportunities.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. We do have another question from Rick Botello, who is watching on LinkedIn. The way he frames it, equity is about designing scalable learning systems and platforms to give all people fair opportunities to reach their highest potential of healthy well-being and human flourishing. Any thoughts on that? Any reactions?
Excuse me. It's like the morning frog in my throat.
Right.
I would agree. I think I think designing scalable learning systems and platforms to create fair opportunities absolutely is part of equity, especially in the area of education. Really sorry, Neil, I got a little frog there.
That's okay.
So I would agree with that, and I think it can move also. It could be broadened beyond just learning systems. It's also like access points, and so I think there's other elements, but that's a really nice way to describe it. Thank you for sharing that, Rick.
Absolutely. And as a reminder for folks, if you're just joining us, our guest today on the New York Times Read Along is Suzanne McCormick, U.S. President for United Way Worldwide. I used to work at United Way for the past 5 years, so it's an incredible honor to have her on the show. If you're watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, you might be watching on my page, on Shree's page, on Suzanne's page. Please keep typing in your comments. We have a team of producers that help us put the show together every week. Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis. They are diligently copying and pasting your comments so that I can read them and put them on the air. Ordinarily, we would be able to just add your comment, show your name and your face on the screen, but sometimes technology doesn't work exactly the way we expect it to. So we have redundancy and workarounds built in to our system. So please keep commenting, and we will share your comments on the screen. What I'd like to do, Suzanne, is to go back to the newspaper. Again, this is the New York Times read along, but I wanted to look at the book review and see what stories we have there. Unless you have a particular section of the paper that you like looking at, we've covered the front page and the opinion section. If you had the paper, which way would you go? Book review?
I'd love to go to the book section. As I said, I'm not so great with music, and I'm always a little behind on movies. So books are good.
Aren't we all behind on movies these days? Are there any books on your nightstand right now? Are you a avid reader, or do you listen to books?
I do both. I tend to read more. I mean, I've had cases where I read and I listen. I'll be in the same book, both reading it and then also listening.
Really?
It helps me. Yeah, it helps me get through it.
Book.
Yeah, the same book. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll sometimes pick off where I was listening to reading. I actually have. I love to read, and I actually have I think kind of 3 books going right now. I don't normally do that, but one is I like my escapism, and getting at bed at night and just letting go of like what's happening in the world. Based on a recommendation from one of my closest childhood friends, we grew up together in North Carolina, have picked up rereading Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. So that's sort of my escapism. I'm also have on my nightstand a book called Be Safe, Love Mom by Elaine Breyer. She's a mother of 4 military officers. And I think I mentioned my son is serving with the 75th Ranger Regiment. And so I'm reading that. It's a little bit of a support book for parents of kids in the military. And then I'm just starting Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria by Dr. Tatum. I finished White Fragility, about a month ago, and this is my next book that I'm starting just to continue my own learning around equity. So those are my 3 right now.
I appreciate that, and I remember you mentioning that you were reading White Fragility about a month ago, and that's part of our work on equity and part of that learning. I certainly applaud that and encourage others to do that as well. There are any number of books that people can read. Do you think White Fragility is a good first book if people need to kind of understand the discourse, the conversations, the experience that people are having? Just keeping it absolutely real, and we do this on our shows. Particularly on the show that Shri does every day, the COVID-19 call, focus on the health crisis, the economic crisis, the racial justice crisis, and we often talk about the fact we're honest about where we are with race. My background is Indian American, South Asian. We fit in kind of an in-between space between black and white. For folks who are white, often they don't understand the conversations that people of color are having at home. They don't have to have the talk with their kids about getting stopped by the police, et cetera. And I know we had some very difficult conversations, very raw conversations at work when we had staff meetings. Is White Fragility, kind of the starter book, you think?
I think it's a really good starter book. It's easy to read. It's not too long. It's actually one of the books that I read and listened to. I would listen to a chapter on sometimes just when I was out walking. I find like during COVID, I have to be much more intentional about getting up, and so I have a practice of like going out, when I can in the day and just taking a walk. So I would listen to it, and then I would also reread the chapter just to reinforce what I was listening to. I think it's a really good foundational book. I actually bought a copy and sent it to my mother, and encouraging my husband and kids to read it as well.
That's great. Catching up on some of the comments, I do want to acknowledge Brian again. Brian, Brian knows I think the world of him. So he shared something. Neil will forever be a homer for United Way and the Yankees. He knows I'm a big Yankee fan, so thank you, Brian. But we also have Carol Peters. This has been great. Neil and Suzanne, thanks for sharing, shining bright for our United Way and beyond. Jessica Shat, great things happening every day. We're addressing emergent needs and creating long-term change. Want to acknowledge our friend Macron Boot is doing a salt march in between now and Election Day. So thank you, Macron. Jessica and Carol both read obits, so we do have some obit fans out there. And our good friend George Bell is offering greetings. And I had the pleasure of producing their annual meeting online earlier this week. So George, thank you very much for that opportunity. I really appreciated that. Loved working with you and your team to pull that off. This is one of the challenges we've had, right, in terms of bringing events into the digital space, into the virtual space. We're used to, United Way is used to in-person workplace events, in-person kickoffs, and we all have to figure out a new way of doing things. Carol was commenting on your habit of reading and listening. This is a great idea, Suzanne. Thanks for sharing your current reads. She's currently reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And Brooke Smith said she just finished that book, called it a life-changing read. Jessica Shad is currently reading Leadership on the Line and How to Be an Anti-Racist. And to keep it real, she just ordered the new Twilight series book as well. So some balance is important. Deborah Bernick, a friend of ours on the New York Times Read Along, has a great question. And this is a softball. Does United Way also work with unions? They've lost some power in recent years, but serve important collective goals. Suzanne, does United Way work with unions?
Well, you can answer that as well as I could, Neil. Yes, Deborah, thanks for asking that. We have a team at United Way Worldwide on the U.S. team that focuses specifically on our relationship with labor. Our partnership with labor and with labor unions is one of the longest standing partnerships that United Way has in our history. Unions and union leadership, very focused on the health and well-being of workers across America. So yes, we have actually across the country, we have over 100 labor liaisons who are working in local markets with large union concentration, just to think about how we partner to serve members of those communities together. So yeah, a very important partnership to United Way.
Absolutely. And I was proud to work with our labor team, but also folks may not know I worked for a union before joining United Way of Snohomish County back in Washington State. And my mom is a longtime member, what is a retired member, and was a member of a union in New York, SEIU. So that's something that's always important to me. I did mention that we would talk about the book review, and it's 9:55. I don't know what happened in the last 20 minutes. We were talking. I said we have a lot of time, and then we could jump in. So let's take a look at the book review real quick, and then I have a surprise guest that's going to join us for a few minutes when we finish the book review. So this first piece on the book review is Marriage Interrupted. And I'm trying to figure out if this is a fiction or nonfiction book. It's a rich, complex book, but in the end, it's a story of a marriage, a remarkably good one, considering how mismatched this fictional husband was with this spouse. I always like reading the nonfiction parts. Again, similar to my approach to reading obits, I learn a lot about history and current affairs. by reading book reviews. So let's see what catches eye. This Black Lung. Speaking of unions, America's mistreatment of coal miners and their decades-long search for justice. I don't think the timing could have been any better. Certainly, and this picture is from a rescue team after the '68 disaster in Farmington, West Virginia, disaster that killed 78 men. Book about crisis management, memoirs by two politicians whose leadership was tested by tragedy. This is focusing on Charlottesville, and then by Chris Murphy as well from Connecticut, speaking about Newton, Connecticut. Those always give us pause when we talk about the mass shooting events. This book, The Never-Ending Conflict, Animosity Between Journalists and the White House, is a constant feature of American life. This is by Jack Schaefer, Presidents versus the Press. Stolen Heart. This is interesting. A heart transplant in 1968 raised troubling questions about medical ethics and the brutal realities of segregation. This is again, it's raising issues that were not first raised, but really highlighted in the 1619 Project, which we covered last year. If you're familiar with that, Suzanne, this was a major effort by the New York Times to highlight the long-term effects of slavery, the modern-day impact of slavery.
I listened to the podcast of that. It was great.
It was Nicole Hannah Jones. We had Sunny Slaughter on our show that day. I went to her place and interviewed her. We focused on that package exclusively, and it was incredibly moving, incredibly powerful to talk about those issues. And we've talked about that at United Way, understanding the impact of redlining, for example, and housing discrimination over the years. Getting Here, this telling the story of refugees in America through the tales of two women. So that's this story on this plot on the left. Subprime, a personal reckoning with the 2008 financial crisis. And Whale Watching, what is our relationship to these enormous animals? So you really do get a full range of stories just looking at the book review. There she is, A Cultural History of a Celebrated Beauty Contest That Wants to Be Something More. Vanessa Williams' picture, Looking for Miss America. So some really good breadth. And here on the back, this piece, read the untold stories of the diverse heroines who fought for the 19th Amendment, coming full circle to the beginning of our conversation when you were talking about women's suffrage and the images that are often used. Veronica Chambers, again, was our guest on the New York Times read-along back in August, talking about a lot of these stories and sharing. This is a book that she and other colleagues at the New York Times put together, Finish the Fight, which was really interesting. And there's always an interesting sketchbook in the back of the New York Times book review. And this is, Can a Book Capture the Magic of Birdwatching? Many have tried. We didn't quite get to the Sunday business section. Bestsellers sell the best. Publishing is becoming a winner-take-all game. Nobody dominates it like Madeline McIntosh at Penguin Random House. Again, just looking at the layout, a very dominant photo, a long portrait. And then another article smaller. This is Crisis Was Generations in the Making. Housekeepers, many of them undocumented, are among the hardest hit by the pandemic. And this piece in Arts and Leisure about Chris Rock, interview with him discussing a summer of strife, President Trump, when Jimmy Fallon used blackface on Saturday Night Live, and his role in this season's Fargo. So we are at 10 o'clock, and what I'd like to do is make sure that we, take this down. I would like to bring on a special guest if I can, and then see if there are any other comments. I know Olinda Rodriguez is watching from Goa. She's been reading the New York Times for a long time. Deborah Bernick, who had asked that question about unions earlier, her dad and his colleagues were with the ILGW, which is I believe, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. They were organizers back in the day. Ellen Austin says hi from New York. Therese Steiner says, thanks, Suzanne and Neil, for sharing with the importance of living united. She also did hashtag T-shirt Nation. Again, both of us showing off our Live United shirts. Absolutely. And she's saying my interview with Sunny Slaughter was extraordinary. David Ross from United Way, and I can't remember which United Way David is from. I think in Tennessee. In December, he'll celebrate 24 years with United Way. Some of the best advice, guidance, and assistance I've had. Okay, I was reading this in real time. I didn't read the comment yet. And I'll bring my daughter, Emily, who's going to join us as our guest. I'll bring her in first. David said, I will celebrate 24 years with United Way. Some of the best advice, guidance, and assistance I've had has come from you. You are a permanent part of the fabric of our success in Owensboro and throughout Kentucky, not Tennessee. Sorry. You are welcome here anytime. Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. Like I said, Suzanne, I wasn't reading ahead when I saw that, and it's a United Way of the Ohio Valley. But with that, I want to introduce everyone to my daughter, Emily, who wanted to just say hi to folks. Emily, this is Suzanne McCormick. I don't know if you ever met Suzanne.
I think, Emily, we've met on a Zoom before. When your dad was working with me, at least I know I saw you on a Zoom.
You were saying, Suzanne?
I was saying I think I've met Emily on a Zoom.
That you've met on the Zoom before with,
yes.
I think maybe you'd come on a Zoom call once.
Or we've seen you.
She's seen you at least, even if you haven't seen Suzanne. But Suzanne works at United Way. But I don't work there anymore, right? Mm-hmm. No. So with that, is there anything you'd like to say, Emily? Seriously, do you want to say anything or no? You just want to wave and say hi? Hi. Just wave and say hi. That's fine too. And she's going to run away now. Bye. She likes making little cameos like that. And David is the president and CEO of United Way of the Ohio Valley. Thanks for those comments, David. With that, Suzanne, any final thoughts in terms of how people can learn more about United Way, what you think people should be thinking of as we head into the fall elections? United Way is active in advocacy, but of course not in electoral politics as a 501c3.
I would say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First, Neil, thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I was a little skeptical about giving up my sleep-in time on Sunday, but it is well worth it. I think if folks want to learn more about United Way, go to unitedway.org. That's our website. It's a good starting place. I think most importantly, we want to be the place in a community where someone can come to get involved or to get assistance. And if you want to be active in your community, there's no better place to start than United Way. Again, because we try to look objectively and holistically at what is happening, and we can help connect people to what they care about. I think one of the most important things all of us need to focus on right now is leading up to our November elections. Our election, not just at the national level, but also at our state levels and our local levels. Really educating ourselves about who our potential next leaders are, understand what they care about, what they stand for, so that when you do vote, you can vote and make a very informed decision. And you got to push hard for real information versus information that is skewed. So just want to really encourage people to embrace the great privilege that we have in this country to vote, and also to take it with great responsibility.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. I want to bring in just a few more comments before we close. Our friend Rick Botello, who commented earlier, said that he had been giving to United Way through his paycheck throughout his career, and came away from today's conversation with a greater appreciation of their work. So there's a donor out there that's watching. Rick, I didn't realize that you were a donor to United Way, so thank you for that. I think this is part of what we do, right? Whether it's reaching a new audience, whether it's reaching an audience that has heard of United Way. One of the things that we know and that we understood from a communications perspective is that there's a lot of awareness of United Way, but not a lot of understanding. And there's brand recognition. People know United Way, may have seen the Live United t-shirt, but don't always know what United Way does. So hopefully a new audience heard more about United Way today, and some of our existing donors heard about United Way as well. So Rick, thank you for that. I want to also just make sure before we go, I was mentioning it on the screen, scrolling across the screen, but next week, our guest is going to be Lori White. And I'll just put that, Lori White. Sri will be back next week, and hopefully comments will be back on screen as well. But Lori White is the president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, Rhode Island's largest private sector business advocacy and economic development organization. She'll be joining us next Sunday, September 27th. And as always, we'll be live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And for folks who have time and are more interested in some of the additional shows that we have, at 11 o'clock, we have another show that we produce called She's on Call, hosted by Dr. Sujata Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian, two surgeons, and they talk to guests on a wide variety of issues. This week's guests are Dr. Sue Kwan and Dr. Girma Tefera. So I certainly encourage you to join at 11 o'clock. And then this evening at 9 o'clock, Sri will be on hosting his daily Sri COVID-19 call. He's been on the air for 194 straight days through the pandemic, talking about the health crisis, the economic crisis, and the racial justice crisis. Sunday nights are positivity nights. He tries to keep things a little bit more upbeat, and his guest will be Alexander Rosides, founder and president of Social Impact Exchange, at SI Exchange, if you want to watch this evening. So with that, Suzanne, I want to thank you again for joining us. It has, I've said it at least 4 times because I mean it, and I'd be saying it the whole time if I didn't. It was an absolute honor and pleasure to work at United Way, to work at my local United Way for 4 years in Everett, Washington, and then at United Way Worldwide. And then to have you as a guest on our show really meant the world. I'm thrilled to be able to stay in touch with a number of colleagues, both locally and nationally. And I appreciate you giving up your Sunday morning to join us and join our community.
It was great. Really enjoyed it. And thanks to everybody on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. It's really fun to be part of the conversation this morning.
And we'll go back and we'll go back into the actual post and respond to comments since we couldn't put them on the screen today. But with that, thank you. And we hope you join us next week when Lori White will be our guest on Shree's Sunday New York Times read along. Till then, have a great week, and don't forget to vote.